Every state in America has its secrets, places where the living whisper and the dead never leave. But some are worse than others. So tonight, we're going deeper than ever before. From creaky houses and forgotten plantations, to asylums soaked in death and hotels cursed by history. This is the 7 levels of haunted places in America. And if you think level 1 is scary, just wait until we climb to level 7, because that's the point where even ghost hunters refuse to stay. Are you ready? Let's begin. Level 1. Creepy basements and abandoned houses. Picture this. You've just moved into a quiet old home. The kind of place where the floorboards sigh under your footsteps, and the walls seem to breathe when the wind howls at night. At first it feels like charm, history, a house with character. But then, you notice the basement. The door is old, painted over a dozen times, but the handle feels too cold. The kind of cold that doesn't come from bad insulation, but from something else. And if you're unlucky enough to go down there, that's when the house begins to notice you. The Sally House, Atchison, Kansas. This story begins in the 1990s with a young couple named Tony and Deborah Pickman. Like many newlyweds, they wanted a cozy home to raise their family. They found a charming little house in Atchison, Kansas, known today as the Sally House. The first few days were normal. They painted walls, set up furniture, and began to dream about their future. But almost immediately, something was wrong. Lights flickered, even after electricians checked the wiring. The dog refused to enter certain rooms, and toys, carefully put away, would reappear scattered across the floor. At first, Deborah thought it was stress, or maybe just her imagination. But then, one night, Tony woke up screaming. He had deep, bloody scratches across his chest. Scratches that hadn't been there when he went to bed. The little girl's spirit. Locals whispered that the house was haunted by the ghost of a little girl named Sally. Some said she was 6 years old when she died during a botched surgery inside the house. Others believed Sally was never a child at all, but something darker, hiding behind the mask of innocence. The Pickmans began to see her. A small girl with big eyes appearing at the foot of their bed. Sometimes she looked sad. Other times, her expression twisted into pure rage. And every time she appeared, Tony was attacked again. Scratches, burns, bruises. Deborah begged him to leave, but Tony insisted on staying, until Sally made it clear she wasn't asking anymore. The fire. One morning, Deborah walked into the nursery. The baby's clothes were folded neatly in the crib, but the words, "Leave now," were burned into the fabric. The family fled. The Sally House has since become one of America's most notorious haunted houses. Paranormal investigators, TV crews, even skeptics. They all come, and most leave convinced something is still there. Some report toys moving by themselves. Others catch voices on recording devices. One group claimed they saw a shadow crawl across the ceiling like a spider. Would you go down into that basement, knowing you might not come back the same? The pattern of haunted houses. The Sally House isn't unique. Across America, thousands of abandoned houses carry the same stories. A shadow darting across the corner of your eye. A door that opens, even when locked. A basement that feels like it's breathing. Skeptics dismiss it as drafts, creaks, or bad wiring. But families who've lived through it tell the same chilling details, again and again. One former resident of a haunted Ohio farmhouse described it this way. At first, it felt like someone watching from the corner of the room. Then it touched me. After that, it wanted more. Why basements? There's a reason so many hauntings start below ground. Basements are cold, damp, and silent. They're the part of the house that never sees sunlight. They're also where families used to store personal belongings. Photographs, clothing, even keepsakes of the dead. And in many older homes, basements doubled as makeshift hospitals during epidemics. Patients died there. Their bodies were kept there, waiting to be buried, so the energy lingers. And when you step into that space, you're not just walking on stone floors, you're walking on history, on trauma, on graves that were never marked. A final warning. Even today, the Sally House remains open for tours. Visitors report nausea, dizziness, or the overwhelming urge to leave. Some swear they've been scratched, just like Tony. Others say Sally still whispers, her voice caught on tape. I want to play. So here's the question for you. If you heard that voice in your own basement, would you run or would you whisper back? Level 1 shows us what happens when a single house, a single room, can turn your life upside down. But haunted homes are only the beginning. Because if you think a child's ghost is terrifying, wait until we step into Level 2, where the hauntings don't just scare, they kill. Level 2, famous ghost stories, when hauntings turn deadly. Level 1 was about creepy basements and houses that whisper in the dark. But Level 2? This is where the stories get bigger, darker, and deadly. Because these aren't just strange noises or cold spots. These are hauntings that became legends. Stories so terrifying they've been passed down for generations. Because they changed lives forever. 2 names stand out. One whispered in the South, and one that shook the entire world. The Bell Witch, Adams, Tennessee. The year was 1817. A farmer named John Bell moved his family into a modest home in Adams, Tennessee. For a while, life was simple, peaceful. Then the knocking started. At first, John thought it was animals. Rats, maybe. But the sound grew louder, more insistent. Soon, his children claimed their blankets were ripped off while they slept. Pillows were thrown, and at night, a voice began to speak. Not whisper, not moan, but speak. It called itself Kate. Sometimes the voice laughed. Sometimes it sang hymns, and sometimes it cursed the family with words no decent neighbor would ever dare say out loud. The torment. The Bell Witch became a nightmare that the whole town witnessed. Visitors heard the disembodied voice mocking them. Ministers came, only to be insulted by the ghost. And John Bell himself was targeted the most. He grew weak. Illinois, every day, the attacks got worse. By 1820, he was bedridden. His tongue swelled. His body shook. On December 20th, 1820, John Bell was found dead. Beside him, a strange vial of black liquid. The voice of the witch rang through the house that morning, declaring proudly, I gave old Jack a big dose of that last night, which fixed him. To this day, John Bell's death is considered the only recorded case in U.S. history of a spirit being blamed for murder. Would you sleep in that house, knowing the ghost doesn't just scare, it kills? The Amityville House, Long Island, New York. Fast forward to the 1970s. A quiet neighborhood on Ocean Avenue in Amityville, New York. The house was beautiful, Dutch colonial style, with 2 quarter-moon windows that almost looked like glowing eyes. But in November 1974, it became infamous. That was the night 23-year-old Ronald DeFeo Jr. took a rifle and murdered his entire family as they slept. His parents, his brothers, his sisters, all shot in their beds, all found face down. But the horror didn't end there. The Lutz family. 1 year later, George and Kathy Lutz moved into the house with their children. They got the property for a bargain. But within 28 days, they fled in terror, leaving everything behind. Why? Because the house came alive. Cold spots appeared that no heater could fix. Green slime oozed from walls. The family heard voices commanding them to get out. George woke up at 3:15 a.m. every single night, the exact time of the DeFeo murders. One night, Kathy claimed she was levitated from her bed. Another night, George saw a figure with glowing red eyes staring at him through the window. The final straw came when doors slammed shut on their children. trapping them inside. The Lutz family never spent another night there. Legend or truth? Skeptics argue the Lutz family exaggerated their story to make money. After all, books and movies quickly followed. But here's the thing. Every family that lived in the house afterward reported strange experiences. Not as extreme, but enough to keep the legend alive. And every time someone drives past that house with its eye windows, they can't help but glance. Because once you know what happened there, you can't unsee it. Why these stories matter? Both the Bell Witch and Amityville remind us of something terrifying. Sometimes the supernatural doesn't just whisper. It doesn't just play games. Sometimes it leaves a body, a final dare. The Bell Witch Cave still stands in Tennessee. Visitors report whispers and sudden pushes in the dark. And the Amityville house? It still exists on Ocean Avenue. You can go there, you can stand on the sidewalk, but the locals warn you, don't stare too long into those windows. Because if the legends are true, the house just might stare back. Level 2 shows us that some hauntings never fade. They grow into legends. But if ghosts in houses are terrifying, what about ghosts on entire battlefields? Places where thousands of men fell, and the earth itself remembers the screams. Welcome to Level 3. Haunted battlefields, where the dead still march. Imagine standing in the middle of an empty field. The grass sways, the wind is calm, but then you hear it. The sound of boots pounding the earth, the distant boom of cannon fire, and the sharp crack of rifles. You spin around, but no one is there. Welcome to America's haunted battlefields, where the dead refuse to rest. Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. The year was 1863. The Civil War was raging, and Gettysburg became one of its bloodiest battles. Over 50,000 soldiers were killed, wounded, or missing in just 3 days. Today, Gettysburg looks peaceful. Rolling hills, statues, and fields where tourists snap photos. But for many, it doesn't feel peaceful at all. Visitors report hearing cannon fire echo across the fields at dusk. Some claim to smell gunpowder, thick and heavy in the air. And others have seen the soldiers themselves, the Phantom Regiment. One of the most famous encounters happened to a group of reenactors. They were in uniform, practicing drills when they saw another unit approach. The men looked tired, dirty, their faces pale and gaunt. But they walked with purpose, weapons in hand. The reenactors thought it was another group, until the soldiers vanished into thin air. Gone. No trace. And they realized the uniforms weren't replicas. They were authentic Civil War gear from 1863. Imagine seeing an entire regiment of soldiers and realizing they've been dead for over 150 years. The Weeping Spirits. Many visitors also report seeing lone figures at night, men in torn uniforms wandering the fields, as if still searching for their units. Others kneel in the grass, clutching invisible wounds, crying out for help. One tourist described it this way. It was midnight. I was near Devil's Den. I saw a man lying in the rocks. His face was pale and his chest was covered in blood. I ran to call for help, and when I turned back, he was gone. Chickamauga, Georgia. Gettysburg isn't alone. Another battlefield, in Chickamauga, Georgia, has earned its own terrifying reputation. In 1863, over 34,000 soldiers were killed or wounded there. The forests surrounding Chickamauga still feel heavy with death. Visitors often report glowing blue orbs drifting through the trees at night. But the most chilling story is of something not entirely human. Old green eyes. For decades, soldiers and tourists alike have claimed to see a creature roaming Chickamauga. They call it old green eyes. Descriptions vary. Some say it's a soldier with his jaw blown off, eyes glowing green in the dark. Others claim it's a beast-like figure, crouched low, watching silently. But everyone agrees on one thing: the eyes. Two glowing green orbs that stare from the trees. A park ranger once admitted he saw it himself. Driving home late at night, he saw glowing eyes by the roadside. When he stopped the car, the figure was gone, but the air reeked of sulfur. Is old green eyes a spirit of the battle, or something darker that feeds on tragedy? Why battlefields haunt? Battlefields are different from haunted houses. These aren't just one or two tragic deaths. They are sites where thousands died in agony, often far from home, without graves, without closure. Locals believe the land itself absorbed the trauma, that the energy of fear, pain, and death stained the soil. And when you walk there, the echoes come back to life. The living witnesses. Even skeptics have been shaken. One visitor to Gettysburg described setting up a camera near the wheat field. When they reviewed the footage later, they saw a soldier walking behind them, a man in uniform. But when they turned in real time, no one had been there. At Chickamauga, hikers claimed to hear their names whispered in the trees. One even swore a hand grabbed his shoulder, yanking him back, only to find himself alone. A final warning: if you visit Gettysburg or Chickamauga today, you'll find tour guides, gift shops, and educational plaques. But step off the path when the sun dips below the horizon and the mood changes. The air grows heavier. The silence becomes unbearable. And you realize you're not walking alone. Level 3 shows us that entire landscapes can be haunted. The guns may be silent, but the screams never stopped. But what if the ghosts don't roam wide open fields? What if they're trapped inside walls, corridors, and hospitals where death never left? Because Level 4 takes us into the insane asylums and sanatoriums of America. And once you step inside, you may never come back out. Level 4. Insane asylums and hospitals, where the forgotten still scream. Battlefields are terrifying because thousands died at once. But what if the death stretched on for years? What if people suffered, day after day, inside walls that trapped them forever? That's the story of America's most haunted asylums and hospitals. Places where hope was lost, where screams echoed through endless halls, and where many believe those screams never stopped. Waverly Hills Sanatorium, Louisville, Kentucky. The early 1900s. Tuberculosis, the White Plague, swept across America. There was no cure, no medicine strong enough. So doctors built Waverly Hills Sanatorium on a hill outside Louisville. At its peak, it held over 400 patients at once. Most never left alive. The death tunnel. So many died at Waverly Hills that the hospital built a secret passage, a 500-foot underground tunnel. Patients called it the body chute. Corpses were lowered down the tunnel on a rail system, hidden from other patients, so the living wouldn't see how many were dying. Think about that. So many people died, they needed an underground highway just to carry the bodies away. And today, visitors say the tunnel still smells of death. The Ghost Boy. Waverly Hills is filled with ghost stories. One of the most famous is Timmy, a boy who died there. Tour guides say if you roll a ball down the hall, it sometimes rolls back. Paranormal investigators caught it on video. The ball moved on its own, as if someone invisible was pushing it. Guests swear they hear giggling in empty rooms. One woman claimed she felt a small hand slip into hers, but when she looked down, no one was there. Room 502. Then there's Room 502. The legend says a nurse hung herself there in the 1920s. Her body was found dangling, swaying gently in the draft. Another nurse later jumped to her death from the roof of the same wing. Visitors today say they still see her shadow swaying in the hallway. Others hear a woman's sobs coming from the empty room. What would you do if you heard crying and realized you were the only one there? Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, West Virginia. If Waverly Hills was a house of disease, Trans-Allegheny was a house of madness. Built in the mid-1800s, It was designed for 250 patients. By the 1950s, it held over 2,000. Patients were crammed into tiny rooms. Many were chained to beds, neglected, or subjected to experimental treatments. Torture as treatment. Doctors tried lobotomies, drilling holes into skulls, electric shocks, isolation in pitch-black rooms for days. The asylum became a warehouse of suffering. And with so much pain inside those walls, something stayed behind. The shadow people. Visitors report seeing shadow men dart across hallways. Not faint, but solid black shapes, human-sized, moving too fast for the eye to follow. One tour group claimed they were surrounded. Everywhere they looked, shadows, watching, waiting. Others swear doors slam shut behind them. Some feel their hair pulled, and many describe the same sensation, a cold hand pressing against their back. Would you turn around if you felt someone breathing on your neck? The patients who never left. Guides say the most active spirits are former patients. One woman is often seen staring out from a second-floor window, but when staff rush to check, the room is empty. Others hear screams and pleas for help, echoing through empty halls. One paranormal investigator described it best. It wasn't a ghost sighting. It was trauma replaying itself. The building itself was screaming. Why hospitals and asylums haunt? Think about what these places were. Waverly Hills. Thousands dying slow, painful deaths. Trans-Allegheny. People trapped, tortured, abandoned. When you pour that much suffering into walls, some believe the energy doesn't fade. It stains the building like smoke stains ceilings. And when you walk in, you're breathing in history, but not the kind written in books, the kind that claws at your skin. A final warning. Both Waverly Hills and Trans-Allegheny are open for tours today. Thousands visit each year, but not all make it through. Guides say people faint. Some vomit. Others break down crying for no reason. Skeptics walk in laughing and leave pale, shaking, and silent. So here's the question. Would you walk into a place where the dead outnumber the living? Would you step into a hallway where every scream from the past still echoes? Because if you do, you may not walk out the same. Level 4 shows us what happens when human suffering is sealed inside walls. When hospitals and asylums stop healing and start haunting. But not every haunting needs a building. Sometimes the curse hides in an object, a mirror, a doll, and if you touch it, it might follow you home. Welcome to Level 5. Level 5, Cursed Objects in Rooms, when the haunting follows you. Most hauntings are tied to places, a house, a hospital, a battlefield. But what if the curse could fit in a suitcase? What if it could sit on your shelf, smiling at you? Or hang on your wall, watching silently every time you walk by? That's the danger of cursed objects. And once you touch them, they say the haunting never lets go. Robert the Doll, Key West, Florida. It looks innocent at first. A child-sized doll dressed in a sailor suit, sitting quietly in a chair. But Robert the Doll is one of the most infamous cursed objects in America. The story begins in the early 1900s. A boy named Robert Eugene Otto was given the doll, possibly by a servant skilled in voodoo. He named it Robert. Soon, strange things started happening. Neighbors swore they saw the doll moving from window to window when no one was home. The boy blamed broken toys and accidents on Robert. At night, the family heard giggling, not from the boy, but from the doll. Would you stay in a room where the doll laughs and no one else is there? The curse. As Robert grew up, he kept the doll, even after he married, even after his wife begged him to get rid of it. When Robert died, the doll was placed in the Fort East Martello Museum in Key West. That's when the letters started pouring in, thousands of letters, taped to the walls around Robert's case. They all say the same thing. I'm sorry. Visitors who mocked the doll by laughing or taking a photo without asking permission, claimed they were cursed afterward. Car crashes, sudden illnesses, broken bones, financial collapse. The only way to lift the curse, they say, is to write Robert a letter of apology. Would you take his photo, knowing a curse might follow you home? The Haunted Mirror. The Myrtles Plantation, Louisiana. We've already seen how the Myrtles Plantation is one of America's most haunted homes. But inside, one object is feared above all: a mirror. It looks like any other antique, tall, gilded, its glass slightly clouded with age. But visitors swear the mirror holds more than reflections. Faces in the glass. Legend says the mirror trapped the souls of Sarah Woodruff and her children, poisoned by the servant Chloe in the 1800s. Guests claim to see handprints appear on the glass, prints too small to be their own. Others say they've seen faces, not reflections, but ghostly faces staring back. Some even report shadows moving inside the glass, as if the mirror opens into another world, a room that watches. The mirror sits in the plantation's main hallway. Staff warn visitors, don't stare too long, because too many who did say they left with nightmares. Nightmares of children calling their names, of women reaching from the glass. One tourist described it like this: I turned to walk away, but my reflection didn't. It stayed, staring at me, smiling. What would you do if your reflection refused to follow you? Why objects haunt? Psychics believe curses attach to objects because they're personal. Dolls, mirrors, jewelry, things people held close or died with. Others say the objects act like anchors for spirits, a piece of the past that refuses to move on. Whatever the truth, the warning is always the same: don't touch what isn't yours. And if you feel drawn to a certain object in an antique shop, maybe there's a reason. A final warning: both Robert the Doll and the Myrtles Mirror still exist today. You can visit Robert in Key West, but don't forget to ask permission before snapping a picture. And if you feel the urge to laugh at him, remember the letters. You can stand in front of the mirror at the Myrtles, but if a face stares back at you, pray it's your own. Level 5 shows us the danger of objects. But what if the curse isn't locked in a doll or a mirror? What if it spreads across entire towns, mountains, and cities? Because Level 6 takes us to mass haunting sites, places where hundreds of people witness the same terror. And once you step in, you may never step out. Level 6, mass haunting sites. When the whole town sees the ghosts, haunted houses are terrifying. Cursed objects can follow you home. But what happens when an entire mountain, a whole city, or even a town itself becomes haunted? These are the mass haunting sites. Places where hundreds of people, strangers, tourists, scientists, all see the same thing, and no one can explain it. The Brown Mountain Lights, North Carolina. High in the Appalachian Mountains, there's a ridge called Brown Mountain. By day, it looks peaceful. Rolling hills, dense trees, a wide open sky. But when the sun sets, something awakens. For centuries, people have reported strange glowing orbs drifting above the mountains. Sometimes white, sometimes red, sometimes dozens at a time, rising like lanterns from the earth, witnessed by generations. The first reports came from Cherokee legends, spirits carrying torches, searching for their lost warriors. Later, settlers swore they saw the lights too. By the 1900s, the stories grew so widespread that the U.S. Geological Survey investigated. They claimed the lights were just train headlights. But here's the problem. Floods had already washed away the train tracks, and the lights kept appearing. So what are people really seeing when the mountains glow? Modern sightings. Even today, tourists gather at viewing platforms, hoping to catch a glimpse. Some leave disappointed, others leave shaken. One camper described it like this: the lights rose out of the valley. They drifted silently, then one shot straight toward us. It stopped, hovered, and vanished. I'll never go back there. NASA even studied the lights in the 1960s. No explanation ever satisfied locals. So the question remains, are the lights spirits of the dead or something far stranger? Salem, Massachusetts, the city of witches. Salem is known for one thing, the witch trials of 1692. Over 200 people were accused of witchcraft. 19 were hanged. One man was crushed to death under stones. The hysteria left a scar so deep, Salem has never healed. The gallows. The execution site, Gallows Hill, is said to remain cursed. Visitors report feeling choked, as if ropes are tightening around their necks. Others claim to hear screams echoing through the night. Some even say they've seen figures swaying in the trees, their bodies pale and broken. Would you dare stand on the hill where 19 people took their last breath? The Witch House. In Salem stands one of the last surviving buildings from the trials, known as the Witch House. It belonged to Judge Jonathan Corwin, who sent innocent people to die. Tourists say the house feels heavy, as if the walls remember. Cold spots follow you from room to room, and some visitors say they hear voices, women begging for mercy. One local described it like this: I walked into the house and felt someone grab my wrist. I looked down and saw bruises forming where nothing touched me. The town that breathes fear. Salem today is full of museums, tours, and Halloween festivals. But beneath the costumes and fun, the shadows remain. Locals warn that the trials left a curse, not just on the people, but on the land itself. And whether you believe in witches or not, the dead of Salem are not done speaking. Why mass hauntings terrify. When one person sees a ghost, skeptics call it imagination. When a family does, they call it hysteria. But when hundreds of people, across decades, across generations, see the same thing, that's harder to explain away. That's why Brown Mountain and Salem remain mysteries. Too many witnesses, too many stories, too much fear. A final warning: if you ever visit the Brown Mountain viewing platform, don't go alone. And if the lights rise from the valley, don't stare too long. And if you visit Salem, remember this: you're not walking a theme park. You're standing on ground where fear killed dozens of innocents. And some say those innocents are still there, waiting. Level 6 shows us what happens when a curse spreads across entire landscapes. When the dead no longer stay in graves, but fill the skies and streets. But if you think mass hauntings are terrifying, wait until we reach the final step. Because Level 7 takes us to the places so haunted, even ghost hunters refuse to stay a single night. Hotels that inspired horror classics. Towns that vanished under curses. This is the point of no return. Level 7. Places so haunted. No one lasts a night. We've gone through basements, ghost stories, battlefields, hospitals, cursed objects, and even entire towns. But now, we've reached the highest level. The place is so haunted. People don't just visit, they flee. These aren't whispers. These aren't legends. These are places where even seasoned ghost hunters, skeptics, and thrill seekers admit, I couldn't stay. Welcome to Level 7, the Stanley Hotel, Estes Park, Colorado. If you've ever read Stephen King's The Shining, you know the Stanley Hotel. But the story that inspired it is even scarier than fiction. Built in 1909, the Stanley was meant to be a luxurious getaway in the Colorado mountains. But behind its grand white walls, something darker lingers. The spirits of the Stanley. Guests have reported seeing children running through the halls at night, when no children were booked. Others hear piano music drifting from the ballroom, only to find the room completely empty. One chambermaid was killed in an explosion in room 217. To this day, guests say she still hovers over the bed, tucking people in at night. Some even wake to the sensation of hands smoothing the sheets. Would you sleep peacefully, knowing a ghost might be standing over you? Stephen King's Night. Stephen King himself stayed at the Stanley in 1974. He and his wife were the only guests, as the hotel was closing for the season. That night, he dreamed his young son was being chased through the hallways by a fire hose that had come alive. He woke in a sweat, and the idea for The Shining was born. The Stanley has leaned into its reputation. It offers ghost tours. Paranormal groups investigate regularly, and almost every visitor has a story of cold spots, flickering lights, or voices in the dark. But many don't make it through the night, because the Stanley doesn't just inspire fiction, it creates it. Dudleytown, Connecticut's village of the damned. If the Stanley Hotel is famous, Dudleytown is infamous. Deep in the woods of Connecticut lies the ruins of a town abandoned centuries ago. Locals call it cursed. They call it the village of the damned. The curse. The Dudley family settled there in the 1740s. But wherever they went, misfortune followed. Suicides, strange deaths, crop failures, madness. One by one, families left, until Dudleytown was no more. But the curse remained. The forest whispers. Today, the area is closed to the public. Police patrol it, warning visitors to stay away. But those who sneak in report the same things. Sudden, overwhelming dread. Whispers in the trees, though no one is around. Shadows moving between the ruins. Some even claim they returned home, only to find the haunting followed them. Nightmares, scratches, sudden illness. What kind of place is so cursed? Even the state warns you not to enter. Why Level 7 is different. Basements are scary. Battlefields echo with history. But Level 7, this is where terror crosses into obsession. These places don't just haunt visitors, they change them. People leave the Stanley Hotel shaken, unable to sleep for weeks. People who trespass into Dudleytown talk about nightmares that never stop. And some swear. The haunting never lets go. The final warning. If you're brave enough, you can book a room at the Stanley Hotel, tour the halls, listen for laughter in the dark. But if you think of stepping into Dudleytown, remember this. Most towns die because people leave. But Dudleytown? People left because the town itself wanted them gone. And maybe it still does. We've climbed through 7 levels of America's most haunted places. From basements where shadows play games, to cursed towns where the land itself feels alive. So I'll ask you this. Which level would you survive? Level 1? Level 4? Or could you make it all the way to Level 7? Comment below with the place you would never dare spend the night in. And remember, this isn't just entertainment. These places exist. You can book a room, you can buy a ticket, you can stand on the same ground where screams once filled the air. The only question is, would you walk out again? If this video gave you chills, make sure to subscribe, because every week, we take you deeper into the unknown. And next time, the haunting might be closer than you think.